All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. Welcome to the Donia Human Rights Center lecture. My name is Kyotaro Tsutsui, and I'm the director of the Donia Human Rights Center. And I'd like to begin today's session by thanking all the co-sponsors for their generous support. We have 4 co-sponsoring units: the Center for the Education of Women Plus, Women's Studies Department, Copernicus Program in Polish Studies, and Wiser Center for Europe and Eurasia. Okay. And now I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Krzysztof Śmiszek. Wow. Good thing I practice. Who is a leading expert on equal treatment legislation broadly and LGBTQ rights in particular in Poland and in the EU. Educated in Poland, he earned his PhD in human rights law and the European Union from the University of Warsaw in the Faculty of Law and Administration. Leveraging his significant legal expertise, he has advocated for anti-discrimination efforts in Poland and EU, drafting legislation, submitting legal opinions in courts, voicing his views at the United Nations and other international forums, founding and working with NGOs that promote human rights and equality, and managing an international legal journal called the Anti-Discrimination Law Review as its managing editor. So it's somebody who has not only been engaged in intellectual debates around human rights and equal treatment, but also fighting the battles in the trenches. And we are fortunate to have him here today to hear his views on human rights situations in Poland and EU, in particular about LGBTQ rights issues. Now, Poland is often mentioned as at-risk country in terms of erosion of human rights and democracy, along with Hungary and perhaps Italy these days, at least in the US media. Okay? And he will share with us some more nuanced views about what's going on there, and whether our perception of the political reality in Poland is somewhat exaggerated or not. Rights situations there are of special interest to observers of human rights politics because of the critical geopolitical location of Poland, situated between the West and the East, and because the politics there might foreshadow the future of other democracies that are facing a similar backlash, like the United States. Okay. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Śmiszek.
Okay, so thank you, Kyo, for introduction. Thank you, Donia Center, for inviting me to this event. I feel really honored and privileged to be here and to share my, let's say, experiences and thoughts about the situation of LGBTQ rights in Poland, and also I would like to add a bit of European perspective to this issue. Well, I had a privilege to have a talk here at the University of Michigan on 7th of September, and I finished my talk with a bit pessimistic ending or pessimistic thought. However, this time it will be more optimistic. So let's start. So well. Speaking about LGBTQ rights in Poland, this is kind of extremely, I would say, interesting issue because, well, we are now in Poland witnessing very vivid discussions around human rights, especially around LGBT rights. Well, the time is very much, the time is very interesting because we are witnessing very visible clash of different narratives. On one hand, we have a very conservative, socially conservative government, and LGBT rights are quite, I would say, challenged and targeted by the new government. However, at the same time, we are witnessing a blossom, I would say, of LGBT initiatives, LGBT events, and also we see how much civil society is engaged in defending and progressing LGBT rights. So I would say that Poland is torn between the Eastern, if I might say so, Eastern narrative concerning the place of non-heteronormative citizens or people, and it's torn between also between Western influence on Western approach to this issue. So Poland being situated in the center of Europe is a very interesting, I would say, battlefield between those two perspectives. So today I'm gonna say a few words about three issues. I would like to say something about the place of LGBTQ rights in the Polish legal system. I claim that LGBTQ rights in Polish legal system are still almost completely invisible. I would also like to say a few words about the European systems, whether they are contributing to the advancement of LGBTQ rights in Poland or not, and what is the role of the European Union or the Council of Europe in progressing the rights of LGBT minority in my country. As well, I would like to say a few words about current Polish political debates around those issues. And those issues, I would say, are still in the center of political debates in my country. So I would like to start with a bit of history just to, let's say, set a scene in terms of speaking about LGBT rights. And I said that Poland is quite, let's say, is torn between those conservative and progressive tendencies. So it is not a current, I would say, phenomenon. It was also a phenomenon that took place many years ago. So the first landmark date or landmark year for the LGBT community in Poland was the year of 1932, where Polish lawmakers decided to decriminalize intimate same-sex consensual activities. So as you can see, Poland was much more progressive in 30s than other Western countries like Germany, Spain, Sweden, Austria, the countries that are now front runners in terms of LGBT rights. So Poland was like much earlier in terms of the efforts of seeing the LGBT community in my country. Well, just to mention that the last European country or the region that decriminalized intimate same-sex consensual activities is Northern Cyprus. That took place in 4 years ago. So you see that, we were, at that times, we were kind of front runners in Europe. Well, also, early 60s, that's the year of the first Polish court judgment allowing for changing the birth certificate for a transgender person. So that is also kind of, I would say, a landmark issue. We were also quite progressive during those times in terms of recognition of let's say existence of transgender people in our society. Well, 1969, that was the last decision of the communist lawmakers. They decided to decriminalize homosexual prostitution. Well, the 80s brought a horrible situation when between 1985 and 1987, so-called Hyacinth, I think pronouncing it in the right way, Hyacinth action took place. That was action organized by a communist regime, and the action targeted more than 11,000 gay men that were identified, intimidated, and blackmailed because of their sexual orientation. As we call pink files, and those documents from this action are still missing. The only person that knew where the files are was the General Kiszczak, who died 2-3 years ago. At that time, he was a minister for internal affairs, and he actually organized this action. So he took this mystery to his grave. So, so we still don't know where the files are. And the last landmark, I would say, decision of the Polish lawmakers was introduction the protection of protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation in the workplace, and that took place in 2004. And actually, this is the last year, the recent year, or the last year when any kind of action, legislative action, took place in terms of advancing LGBT rights. So, as you see, the last 14 years did not bring any, I would say, significant legal change. However, I mean, the LGBT community is quite, I would say, quite active in terms of advocating its rights. However, with no significant successes, I would say. Since 2003, there were 8 attempts to introduce Civil Unions Act. So far, we are one of the last European Union countries without any legislation of this kind. So you may think about some other countries, also Central European countries like Czech Republic, Hungary, Croatia, countries that are not, I would say, seen as the most progressive ones. However, in those countries, there are quite a strong acts of law regulating same-sex unions. Poland is one of the last countries in Europe without any laws of this type. Well, Poland is also a country without any protection against homophobic and transphobic hate speech and hate crime. Poland was many times condemned by Council of Europe, also by United Nations, for not having any kind of law in this field. The Polish government is still quite, I mean, is opposing to introduce the anti-hate speech and anti-hate crime laws. Well, there is no protection in education based on, I mean, no protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation in education, no protection in the field of healthcare, no gender recognition provisions, no same-sex, no recognition of same-sex unions concluded abroad. Well, this is becoming a growing problem because Poles are, I mean, allowed to travel abroad within the European Union, and many of Polish citizens, they concluded their same-sex marriages or same-sex unions abroad. They come to Poland and they want to have their rights recognized. However, the approach of the Polish administration, but also Polish courts, is that this kind of union cannot be recognized under the Polish law, and actually it's against Polish constitution. So a few years ago, I personally asked the Minister of Justice whether, asked the Minister of Justice to explain one situation, because I asked the Minister of Justice, what will be my situation if I go abroad, marry a guy, come to Poland? So whether I asked the minister whether I'm still able to or allowed to marry a woman in Poland, and will there be a bigamy or not? So the Minister of Justice replied that I'm free to marry a woman in Poland, at the same time having a husband in the United States or in Czech Republic or in Germany, because the Polish constitution is more important, so my marriage will be not recognized under the Polish law. So you see the kind of, weird and bizarre situation that Polish LGBT community is situated in. Well, also there is a huge and growing problem of children that are raised in same-sex Polish families living abroad. Well, we have more and more cases of families, of, let's say, same-sex couples, mostly women. However, we have one case of a two Americans, one with Polish roots, who are raising their children together. So when they come to Poland with their children are not recognized, as having two parents. And you can say, oh, whatever, at least they have one parent that is, highlighted in the birth certificate. This is not so easy since, for example, when there is a same-sex union, same-sex couple, and one of the members and one of the party is of Polish citizenship. So, according to the Polish legislation, the child of the Polish person automatically can get or should get Polish citizenship. However, when they apply for a Polish citizenship, they are not able to proceed the application because of the birth certificate of the child, which says that the child has two fathers or two mothers. So the Polish administration denies the Polish citizenship to such children. As well, if you do not have a Polish citizenship, you do not have the social security number, and you are not entitled to health care, to education, to any of public services. So imagine a situation when, for example, the same-sex family comes to Poland. One of the parents is, for example, dies or in the accident. So the child is or can be taken from the second parent to the orphanage, and actually the situation is should be seen as a severe violation of the rights of child. And also there is no legislation concerning protection in access to goods and services. So you see the legal landscape is, I would say, not very optimistic, and I would say that still LGBT community in Poland is an invisible minority, however, quite a big minority living in my country. Well, so contrary to the U.S. System, Poland's legal system is a civil law, right? So we have no precedent setting up the standards. However, what we observed in the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, that in the situation of the absence of, I would say, parliamentary activism, so the national courts take over the initiative and they try to solve concrete legal problems. Well, this kind of situation could be perceived as optimistic, but at the same time, we see that this judicial activism may lead, and it really sometimes leads, to the worsening of the legal position of LGBTQ persons' rights. Well, I know that in 2018, this year in the US, you had quite a big discussion about a very interesting case that was handled by American Supreme Court. This is this famous wedding cake case. So we actually, at the same time, we had a very similar case. So the case did not concern a wedding case. However, the case concerned printer case. So in a nutshell, the printer case, what was all about? We had actually in the same time, the Polish Supreme Court and the American Supreme Court issued their rulings. However, the Polish Supreme Court's decision was much more progressive than the American Supreme Court's judgment. So, few words about the facts. So there was, like 2 years ago, there was a small LGBT organization that asked the printing company to print out a very small thing, which is kind of like plastic banner with a logo on it. So the employee of the print shop or the printing company refused to print the banner, saying that he doesn't want to promote gay rights movement. So, well, you can have like different thoughts, like what was on the banner, like what kind of horrible things were to be printed on this banner. So this horrible, horrible image was just like this. So this is the logo that was to be printed, and that's it. No, this stereotypical things that might come to your mind. So this was the reason of denying the service to the LGBT organization. So what we did as LGBT lawyers or human rights lawyers, so we decided to take the case to the court. We went through all the instances in Polish courts, and actually we used a very old-fashioned legal provision that was actually designed in late 60s, as far as I remember. And that was a very, now it looks very funny, actually. However, in 60s and 70s, when Polish economy was in a very bad condition, there were many situations that the shop sellers, sellers, they were like just hiding the goods and then selling those goods for bigger prices. So we used actually this very old-fashioned provision that was designed to fight market speculation, and we got to the Supreme. We achieved the level of Supreme Court. Well, however, in two instances, the printer company was convicted, and the guy was fined with, I don't know, $10 or $20 fine. Actually, it was not about money; it was about defending dignity of the LGBT community. So we were quite happy, but the case was brought actually not by us, but by the Minister of Justice and the Prosecutor General in one person to the Supreme Court. So what the Supreme Court ruled, I would say that still, it is kind of progressive way of thinking, because the Polish Supreme Court said that sexual orientation, race, or other personal features of the person cannot be the basis for the service refusal. So, as far as I remember, the Supreme Court in the U.S. said that in terms of the wedding cake case, so there was no violation of the prohibition of discrimination. However, the Polish Supreme Court said that sexual orientation cannot be a reason to deny a service to anyone. However, they left the door a bit open for religious claims, and the Supreme Court said that all the cases should be handled individually. So there could be some situation when the religion should be put first over the value of equal treatment. So at least in terms of provision of goods and services, Poland is a bit more progressed than the United States. Well, I would like to also say a few words about the hostile reaction of the government towards the Supreme Court verdict. 20 minutes after Supreme Court issued its decision, the Minister of Justice slammed the Supreme Court's ruling, saying that it's against the freedom, and described the court as a state oppressor by servicing the ideology of homosexual activists, and the court acted against the freedom guaranteed in the Polish Constitution to every citizen, no matter what worldview he/she holds. So the minister the minister was, I would say, brave enough to comment the Supreme Court's ruling in this way, which is a kind of new situation for all Polish lawyers. You are not always happy with the court's verdicts. However, up to now, we try to keep our hostile reaction just for us, Whereas now, I mean, it is kind of, you know, fashion in my country to like openly attack the court's verdicts. So the minister announced that the law, the whole piece of law that we used in order to litigate the printer case will be taken to the Constitutional Tribunal, which is the constitutional organ that holds the mandate to resolve disputes on the compliance of the laws with Polish constitution. I mean, the result is quite obvious, since the Constitutional Tribunal in the course of the last 2 years was packed with political nominees, and we are quite sure that within coming months the law will be repealed. Well, I would also like to say a few words about the legal situation of transgender community in Poland. So there is no law, like horizontal law, on gender recognition. So in the course of the last, let's say, 40, 50 years, the Supreme Court, as well as lower instances courts, were actually forced by individuals to use existing civil provisions in cases of transgender rights. Well, it has, like, just like I said before, it has like good and bad implications. Well, it led to setting up, let's say, in some cases, it led to setting up a horrible standards for transgender people to get their gender recognized by courts. So, for example, if you are a transgender person and you want to have your birth certificate changed according to your wish, so you are obliged to sue your parents and get the permission from your parents. So I mean, we have like 300-400 cases per year of this type. So you can imagine the state of emotions in the courtroom when you, as a mostly rejected child by your parents, you have to ask them for permission, and you have to actually sue them to get their permission. Also, you have to, and this is the recent Supreme Court's judgment, you have to also sue your children if you have them, and you have to get the permission from your children. Well, there is also a very, I would say, horrible standard that says that you have to prove actually to the court that you are like physically ready to live in the indicated gender in the society. So you have to, let's say, in most cases, so you have to start your hormone therapy and be in this process for 1 or 2 years, and to show up in the courtroom from time to time, showing, okay, now I'm ready. I look like a, let's say, woman, or now I look like a male. So maybe the judge will be happy to give you a permission to have your birth certificate changed. And of course, there isn't this obligation to divorce before you get your gender recognized, because according to the Polish Constitution, as most of the courts say, the marriage is a union between one woman and one man. So if you are changing your birth certificate, so it means that if you are not a divorced person, so the court would allow for existence of a same-sex union in Poland. So you have to divorce first, and then get your birth certificate changed. Well, of course, if you are a transgender person, so your healthcare treatment is not covered by public funds. It used to be until 1999. Now it's like only depends on your private money. Well, there is no obligation to gather specific data on hate crimes based on transgender status. And this is kind of a vicious circle, because the governments, respective governments, they say, oh, we have no data that transgender people are persecuted in Poland or are victims of hate crimes. So why would we, why should we change the law? There is no evidence that that this group is targeted because of their transgender status. But at the same time, you have no obligation to gather data. So you've got no data, and you have no, let's say, information that this kind of legislation is actually needed. So there's also a complete lack of the adequate support for trans children, and we are, like, every year we are witnessing like horrible and sad suicides committed by young trans people. Well, just to let you also know that the first decision of the newly elected President of the Republic in 2015 was actually to veto the draft law on, actually not the draft law, the law on gender recognition. So in 2015, our parliament was actually able to, let's say, generate or to work out quite a decent piece of legislation concerning gender recognition. So the first decision of the newly president was to show to the public that he is a guardian of the conservative rules, and that was his first decision as a president of the republic to veto the law. Well, in terms of Poland as a member of two biggest European systems, which is Council of Europe and European Union, I mean, we should ask a question whether European legal systems are actually contributing to the advancement of LGBTQ rights or not. And well, just like I said, so Poland is a member of the Council of Europe and European Union. Council of Europe brings together 47 countries, and it's mainly designed for protection of human rights. European Union is a bit smaller, 28 countries. Next year will be 27, and it's mostly focused on economic issues. So, well, I would like to mention two milestone cases that were handled within the Council of Europe system, that were handled by European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and they're very important cases that I would say sets up a very good standards of protection of LGBT rights, actually in whole Council of Europe area. So the first decision was Bączkowski and others versus Poland, May the 3rd, 2007. So the case concerned gay pride in Warsaw that was actually banned by the mayor of Warsaw in 2005. It was Mr. Lech Kaczyński who after that he became a president of the Republic. So actually he said, well, I don't see any need for permission to hold for the organizers of the Warsaw Gay Pride, because actually I don't see any reason why gay people should demonstrate on the streets. I mean this is a quote. They can demonstrate on the streets as citizens, but not as LGBT. So he actually decided not to allow for a gay pride in Warsaw. So we litigated the case, and we ended up in Strasbourg court. And Strasbourg court issued its verdict in 2007, saying that it was a severe violation of human rights and freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of association in my country. And actually this case is kind of a milestone for LGBT community in the whole Europe, because you have repeating cases from Russia, also from Moldova, partially from Lithuania. So the lawyers litigating these cases in these countries are using the standards that were worked out in the Bączkowski versus Poland decision. And the second very important decision was a decision from 2010, Kozak versus Poland. So it concerned a person who was deprived of his tenancy rights after his partner's death. So we took a case to Strasbourg court. And why that's so important? I mean, the court in Strasbourg said that the denial of inheriting the tenancy rights by this person constituted a violation of prohibition of discrimination, as well as violated his right to family protection. Why it is important? Because for the first time, actually, in the history of the Strasbourg court activism, the Strasbourg court said that same-sex couples should enjoy protection which is guaranteed for families. So the rainbow families were recognized as equal to other families. So this decision is also very important for cases from other countries. Well, so what are we doing now in Poland in terms of litigating LGBT rights? So currently we have 6 pending cases before the Strasbourg court. We actually did almost the same what the US colleagues did, or colleagues from Italy, who actually started strategic litigation of recognition of same-sex couples. So what we did, we found 6 brave same-sex couples, 3 female and 3 male couples. They just went to the marital status offices. They asked for marriage. So of course they were denied, and that was the starting point for the strategic litigation. We went to all instances. We exhausted all instances in Poland. We ended up in Strasbourg court. So we are quite optimistic, bearing in mind that 3 years ago, the same case from Italy was recognized by the Strasbourg court as a situation that violates the European Convention of Human Rights. So it was an extremely important decision by the Strasbourg court, because for the first time in the history of the Strasbourg court, the court said that the European Convention of Human Rights, which is a basic convention for Council of Europe member states, the European Convention obliges the member states to introduce laws on same-sex unions. So this is really a huge case. We've been litigating this case for the last 3 years, and we expect the ruling next year. So fingers crossed. Well, I would also like to say a few words about European Union, because well, there's this general perception that within the area of European Union, the values like non-discrimination, equal rights, tolerance, acceptance is a common value, which is actually not true, or this is not an entire truth. So, well, the European Union legislation concerns mostly issues regarding employment. So there is no obligation for European Union member states to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation in areas like access to goods and services, healthcare, education, and others. Well, the highest court for the European Union, the Luxembourg court, dealt with several cases, and mostly concerning employment situations. Well, there were only few cases concerning issues related to blood donations by gay men or asylum claims based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And actually, the Luxembourg court is extremely progressive in terms of asylum claims of LGBT people escaping the prosecutions in their home countries. Well, this year brought a lot of interesting cases in European Union. The most, I would say, the mostly covered by media, and the biggest one was a ruling in so-called Coman and Hamilton case. So the case was started by a same-sex couple. The one person is of Romanian citizenship. The second person is American. So they concluded. They are in a civil union that was I think concluded in Belgium. So they came to Romania and asked Romanian administration to have issue the residency permits for the American citizen. So Romania is quite a conservative country, so they said, no, our constitution says that the marriage should be defined as a union between man and woman. So the American citizen cannot stay in Romania. So what the couple they took the case to the Luxembourg court, and the Luxembourg court said that European Union member states are having, let's say, autonomy or holding autonomy in terms of family rights. However, European Union is also a space where there is this free circulation of persons, goods, services, money. So, but not giving the permission for a residency permit for the American person is a violation of the fundamental values of the European Union. This is a huge case because, just like I said, there are more and more people from countries like Romania, Lithuania, Latvia, or Poland who are, entering the same-sex unions abroad, and they want to get back to Poland, to Romania, to Lithuania, to have to conduct their family lives, and the administration is now banned from creating any obstacles for this kind of situation. So this is a huge hope for people coming from countries without any recognition of same-sex couples. Well, a few words on current Polish political debates around LGBTQ rights. Well, so a bit of history, but I don't want to bore you to death with history. Since 1989, after the collapse of the communism, we could observe the slow pace of LGBTQ emancipation. However, the successive governments, they were actually not so much interested in focusing on LGBT rights. They were rather interested in they were actually not interested in pushing the equality agenda, whatever the ideology of the government was, right wing, center, left wing. Well, LGBTQ rights started to be in the center of the political debate directly before Poland's accession to the European Union. Well, so some of the European Union values were perceived as detrimental to the Polish tradition. And, well, there is a theory, and I agree with this theory, that right-wing populists and nationalists, just before the accession to the European Union, I mean, they actually found a new Jew. Well, the figure of the Jew at that time was actually replaced, of course, to a certain extent, by a Western gay figure. So the gay rights were perceived as important product of the, let's say, Western culture. So we had a huge discussion in 2002, 2003, and 2004, because Poland joined the European Union in 2004. We had a huge discussion about what it means for a Polish tradition to join European Union. Is it only economic arguments that should be employed, or maybe this is something, there's a hidden agenda behind the, this glossy European Union. Maybe there's something hidden. Maybe there is a, this mystery gay who is, wants to sneak into the, Polish culture. And I mean, we did have this discussion, and we still have it. However, in not so extensive anymore. Well, the Americans, they always appear in these discussions. So there was a huge situation, I would say, in 2006 and 2007, when the European Union was discussing a new treaty for the Union that would, I would say, even more centralize the politics of the European Union. So the President of the Republic, Lech Kaczyński, he was very much opposing to the new treaty. He wanted to keep the nations, separate, the member states of the European Union separated. He didn't want to merge, as he said, into one country. I mean, actually, European Union was never a one country. However, the opponents, they always say that there will be no national cultures anymore if the European Union gets stronger. So he was actually very much opposing to the new treaty, and he produced, I mean, his, let's say, staff produced a very short video that that was showing an American gay couple. I mean, I don't know from where they took this short movie of this American gay couple, saying like, you see, if the new treaty will be passed, this kind of couples will invade our country. So this poor, guys, Brendan Fay and Thomas Moulton, got somehow involved in the huge Polish politics. Actually, they came to Poland year after, and they even visited a Polish parliament, and it was a very nice story. However, you see that the opponents of the European Union, they often use this gay argument to, let's say, to produce this picture of the Western culture as detrimental to our and the only Polish tradition. Well, where there is action, there is reaction. So, the LGBT community did not remain silent, and what we see and what we are witnessing now in Poland, there's a huge response to the political attacks on the LGBTQ community, and actually the process of emancipation and voicing the demands is going on, and it's extremely visible, and I would say it's quite also optimistic. And after 2001, I would say that the phenomenon of LGBTQ organizations flourished, and now you can see that in almost all bigger cities in Poland, there are organizations, or there are actions or initiatives organized by LGBT people. And also first public figures started to support LGBT rights. Also some of the celebrities or politicians, they came out as gay. So we started 20 years ago, we started organizing first gay prides in Poland. And just to give you how fast it goes, so in 1998, the first gay pride in Warsaw brought together only 3 people, with their faces covered, brave activists who, there were 50 journalists and 3 guys with, protesting and, demanding their rights. And 20 years later, this is the picture from this year from Warsaw, there was almost 50,000 people marching on Warsaw streets. So actually, this year it's kind of a phenomenon, I would say. This is a map of Poland, and these are the dates. I mean, we, write dates differently than the United States. I mean, these are the cities where gay prides are taking place in this year. So you see that, even on the east side of Poland, Rzeszów is a very conservative city. This year we witnessed a huge, few thousand people took part in a Rzeszów Gay Pride, which is a huge achievement for the gay community in Poland. Well, I would say that 2011 was a groundbreaking year for the visibility of LGBTQ people in my country. I mean, the first openly gay person was elected as a member of the parliament, as well as a first transgender person, Anna Grodzka, was also elected to the parliament. Actually, she was the 3rd person in the world, transgender person, after New Zealand and Italy, to be elected to the Polish parliament. And this actually brought a huge shift in the public perception and public discussion around LGBT rights and recognition in my country. So this is a photo from the Polish parliament. You see, I mean, many of the MPs, for the first time in the history of the Polish parliament, have these rainbow flags, and they were demanding some laws. So, however, we did have such a huge debate, and we had also, gay LGBT people present in the parliament. So the previous government, which described itself as a pro-human rights, pro-European, center, liberal, they denied to. They refused the draft law on. They didn't agree for adoption of the same-sex union law. Well, 2012 brought a new phenomenon to the Polish political discourse. The gender ideology appeared in Poland. Well, for Polish speakers, when people who do not speak English, using the word gender can mean everything, actually. So the right-wing populists, they started to use this gender term in order to describe, this detrimental flood that will come to Poland and, to destroy our culture. So it's a very capacious, I would say, term, which can mean actually everything. So this is the first page of the biggest Polish weekly magazine, Christian, however, the biggest in Poland, which the title says, "Gender Distorts Minds." Well, I know that for English speakers that sounds really stupid. However, for Poles, it's really, it's really scary. All this story with the gender ideology started when the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice criticized the Council of Europe Convention, a draft convention on preventing and combating violence against women. He said that the convention is not in line with the Polish constitution, and the gender is because the gender in the term in the convention is defined as the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. So this kind of definition for the Polish right-wing parts of the government was too much for them, and they started this whole horrible debate about the role of women, the role of men, the role of LGBT. The place of the LGBT community in the society. Well, as you can imagine, the Catholic Church is also contributing to the it's contributing to the discourse on LGBT rights, and officially the current president of the ruling party said that as long as we are ruling, no same-sex marriage law will be adopted. That means the Catholic Church holds a huge, I would say, a power to influence Polish politics. And the Polish Church is actually in the union with the ruling party, and they are mutually benefiting from each other. So you can see every Sunday Catholic priests condemning LGBT community, but you cannot see any priest actually condemning the violent attacks on LGBT organizations or just gay people on the streets. So we did have few progressive priests, but they are very effectively silenced by the church administration. Well, also you also can find some arguments like LGBT are not Poles or not real Poles, or LGBT people are insulting the national emblems. The eagle, that's the national emblem. So a few weeks ago, we witnessed, the prosecutor charged this poor guy for insulting the national emblem by putting this eagle on the rainbow flag. So you see how symbols are also involved in the Polish debate around LGBT rights. Well, is there any hope for LGBT community in Poland? I would definitely say yes. Well, the younger generation, there is this hope in the younger generation. Younger means less than 40. So becomes secular in an extraordinarily fast pace. Well, there's this research, the report of the Pew Research Center from this year, saying that Poland is on the first place in the world in terms of becoming more and more, I mean, in terms of younger generation becoming secular. So there is a huge hope. Well, also there are recent opinion polls that show that more than 50% of Polish population supports same-sex unions. With regard to some of the specific issues, there are like even more than 70, like for example, the inheritance rights or tax rights. Well, there is also this situation that, you know, if you came out as gay, so it's, you know, it is rather impossible to get back to your closet. So we have like, you know, like more and more people, mostly young, I would say, who are like extremely brave and, you know, to fight for their rights. They are very visible. They are organizing like hundreds of events around the country. I'm like really astonished by what they do. And also the homophobic rhetoric does not work as it used to do a decade ago. Well, you know, sadly to say, but, you know, there are new enemies like refugees, migrants, Muslims to, you know, to be targeted. Well, the gay, I think it's the politicians, the right-wing and populist politicians, actually they lost their hope, you know, in generating this, you know, hostile reaction in terms of LGBT people. So they gave up a bit their fight. Well, but also, you know, this quite a big support for LGBT agenda was also generated because of the smart strategies that have been employed by LGBT activists. So, you know, strategic litigation is one of them. Also, cooperation with progressive circles within the Catholic Church. We do have some of them, and they are quite brave also to raise this issue. Also, from the very beginning of the authoritarian changes in 2015, the LGBT movement started close collaboration with pro-democratic groups or pro-democratic movements. However, it was not that easy at the very beginning. You know, when in 2015 the new government took over the rules, the huge and mass demonstration, you know, started in Poland against the, you know, the destruction of the judiciary, destruction of the rule of law, and LGBT activists, they started to be present from the very beginning at those demonstrations. So, in the first few months, I would say, the LGBT activists were actually treated in a bit hostile way by pro-democratic protesters. You know, people with rainbow flags were kicked out from the demonstrations. You know, they were like insulted and stuff like that. However, you know, they survived, and now whenever huge demonstration, I don't know, in terms of defense of judiciary, defense of constitutional tribunal, Supreme Court, you always see the rainbow flag, and this is kind of like normal. And this is a great achievement in my opinion, because now you see that, you know, this LGBT agenda is kind of like part of the mainstream discourse around democratic values, and this is something that was not so obvious few years ago. Well, just to give you an example how, you know, situation in Poland is complicated in a positive way, I would say. This is the presidential, the opinion polls in terms of presidential election for 2020, and this is the opinion polls from July 2018, and you see three front runners. The first one as a candidate to the office as the current president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, he's got 31%. The second place is 21% for the current president of the European Union, Donald Tusk. And the third place, quite high, I would say, 17%. That's the first openly politician in Poland, the previous member of the parliament and mayor of one of the cities in Poland. So you see, I said that Poland is kind of, like torn between those different debates. And on one hand, you can see a hostile reaction from the members of the parliament, members of the government towards LGBT agenda. At the same time, you have a public figure who's like openly gay and enjoys such a huge support from the from the society. So this is a kind of like, I would say, battlefield for, and a very, very interesting situation also for, I would say, I don't know, sociologists as well, anthropologists. Well, and just to end, well, so just like I said, LGBTQ community does not give up in Poland. Well, the social changes, they do generate hostile reaction, and this is a photo from a few years ago. There was this beautiful art installation called Rainbow, surprise, that was made of like thousands of artificial flowers, situated in the center of Warsaw, in a very posh and hipster area called Savior's Square. So the rainbow, the art installation, was burned 7 times by nationalists. However, the mayor of Warsaw, quite a conservative law professor, she said, okay, I do not support this group, the rights of this group. However, each time the rainbow will be burned, I will rebuild it from public money. And she kept her promises, and she rebuilt 7 times the rainbow. So, well, I just wanted to say at the end that, after the rain comes a rainbow, and well, the hostile reactions, generate friendly reaction, and you could have seen like thousands of Warsaw, people from Warsaw, rebuilding the rainbow by putting, natural flowers, and there was a whole movement around that. So I said that, I asked this question, whether there is a hope for the rights and for the recognition. I definitely say there is a huge hope, and at least in terms of advancing the LGBT agenda, I remain optimistic. So I will stop here. Thank you for your attention. Well, yeah, I was supposed to speak for 45 minutes, to almost 1 hour, however. If you have a question.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for that presentation. I was wondering, so early on in the 60s or before there were starting to be a little bit more rights and recognition, what were some safe spaces that trans or gay people could go to, like bars or restaurants? Was that common in Poland?
In 60s or 70s?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so. The phenomenon of let's say social life in communist Poland, it was that your social life was quite privatized. So people were enjoying their social connections and their like private lives, but at their homes there were no like places like bars or restaurants. Well, there were some places probably where people were having sex. However, I'm too young to remember that. However, I wouldn't say that this gay infrastructure was present. It all started in 1989 when the communist regime collapsed. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for being here. This was great. My question centers on some of the more conservative areas of Europe that maybe are a little bit further behind Poland. And specifically, one thing that comes to mind is a few years ago in Chechnya, there were a few gay men who were locked up and many still have not been heard from. So what your thoughts are on those more conservative areas and where they're moving, and then more specifically, how the use of technology may be used to help support the LGBT community, but also to target them by identifying where they are on safe spaces like dating apps and things like that.
Well, thank you for this question. You rightly said that Poland is not the most hostile region in Europe in terms of LGBT rights. I would say that, leaving aside Chechnya, you have countries like Romania, or in the next few weeks they will hold a referendum, national referendum on definition, on inserting the definition of marriage into the Romanian constitution. And this is kind of, we had a great conversation with Kiev few hours before on this phenomenon that, what we see in Europe, especially in countries like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, let's say, these Christian countries, like Catholic or Orthodox countries, where they're like very professional organizations being set up, financed from the US, from Russia, conservative think tanks, who are, like stimulating this conservative debate, also legislative debate. In Poland, we have this famous organization which is called Ordo Juris. It is not extremely, professional lawyers litigating cases in terms of, achieving the conservative standard in Polish and the Polish legal system. Well, they appeared like 3-4 year ago. I'm in the human rights field or business for the last 15 years, and we never saw such a huge money, in the human rights organization. So we, all of a sudden, the conservative think tank, is set up. They have dozens of very professional lawyers who are, who are able to hold a professional debate with lawmakers, who are influencing them, who are, I would say, proposing some legal solutions, and they're happily taken by the politicians. So I would say that there is this phenomenon of a conservative wave in countries that do not have strong civil society to defend human rights. So this is a part of the answer to your question. In terms of the technology, so of course, without any doubt, the technology helps a lot. When I was much younger, so the life of a gay person was a bit horrible, I would say. Not knowing anyone around and stuff like that. The technology, usage of the access to the technology helps a lot, especially young people. They're support groups or on the internet. Also, they can easily find organization they can turn to. So definitely it helps, at least in Poland. At least in Central Europe. I don't know about Chechnya. I know that a few weeks ago, the president of Chechnya, officially decided to set up this concentration camps for LGBT community, and there was a case, as far as I remember, of a Chechen gay person who applied for refugee status in Poland recently, and Polish administration said, well, Russia is a huge country, so the guy can go to Siberia or wherever where can he be safe. So this is however, a few years ago, Polish administration was quite happy to grant refugee status to LGBT people from Belarus, from Russia as well. So you see, this conservative rhetoric that is employed by the Polish government now also has a very severe impact on foreigners who are looking for a safe place to live, to survive in Europe. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
So moving from more conservative to more progressive area, do you think Ireland might be a promising model that Poland is following? Because you're talking about the change of social attitude, and Ireland not long time ago had a referendum and sort of allowed the same-sex marriage to be legal. I'm not arguing for a referendum, but do you see that kind of social change could bring more legal change as well? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. I'm always asked to compare Ireland and Poland, and both of these countries are perceived as being very Catholic. However, there's a huge difference between Poland and Ireland, because Ireland, it's a country where the institutional church actually possessed or owned and still owns a huge part of educational system, around schools, but, and so on and so forth. However, in Poland, it is not the same. Actually, Polish church is very influential and still is kind of immune for different kinds of accusations of pedophilia and scandals and things like that. Well, we do have pedophile scandals. I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, they helped a lot for advancing human rights in Ireland or I don't know here in the U.S. However, still Polish church is somehow, I don't know, maybe this critical mass is not achieved yet in terms of well, Poland is a very interesting country since like Poles are very anti-clerical on one side, but very conservative on the other. So this is kind of like a weird mixture, and maybe we'll need few years more to well, the culture helps a lot. There's this recent movie which is called Clergy, and apparently it will be shown for the first time in 2 days or 3 days, and apparently it's like extremely popular, and like millions of Poles subscribe to the Facebook event I'll go to see Clergy movie. And I think that maybe this will be this, one step that, that will be, helpful to finally, tear this real mask of the Polish church down. Maybe this will be, will be a good contribution, a right contribution to this, debate on LGBT rights. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Ireland, went its way to achieve the equality agenda. I think Poland is still waiting, and the church definitely is one of the biggest, I would say, obstacle to get there where Ireland already is. Oh, there's a question.
Yeah, just wanted to thank you for your time. I really appreciate everything that you had to share with us. So a few things, I mean, maybe I'm just a little ignorant, but when you mentioned back in your lecture, looking at my notes, about how there were instances where the legal system is not required to collect information about hate crimes regarding gender. So if there were to be things put in place that would gather that information, what would that look like?
Well, according to the Polish legislation, I mean, the Polish police and Polish public prosecutor, they collect data on hate crimes and hate speech only when the motive of the crime is race, religion, political views. So, I mean, now they are able to every year, to produce a report, and the Office of the National Prosecutor, they publish the reports yearly, showing like what are the numbers in terms of hate crime. And just to give you an example in terms of the number of the racial hate crimes, like 10 years ago, we had 35 reported hate crimes based on racial status. And now we have, like last year, it was 1,600. So, having this kind of numbers in the report, you can design your criminal, let's say, policies, right? I mean, you can design your, I don't know, trainings for the police officers, trainings for judges, maybe some recommendations in terms of changing the law. Well, so, not having the numbers concerning sexual orientation ground or gender identity ground means that it is very useful argument, especially for the current government, saying there are no crimes based on transgender status. So why should we deal with that? This is not it's probably a margin of the margin. So why should we be occupied with this issue? So having numbers, well, like few years ago, the Office of the Public Prosecutor, they somehow did manage to collect a very small piece of data concerning sexual orientation, hate speech. I mean, hate speech or hate crimes based on those statuses. But the current government, in the course of the last 3 years, they denied to collect this data, saying that the law does not permit for collection of this kind of information. So, just like I said, it is very useful for the conservative government to say, well, there's no phenomenon of homophobic hate crimes, so let's not bother with that.
My name's Callie, and I was just I was thinking about the idea of like the Western gay idea, and I was wondering, as the EU legislating on this, has that been somewhat of a detriment to Polish gays and like making sure that, like kind of like pushing that like this is something that's coming internally and it's not just being like imposed on the Polish state?
Well, thanks for this question. And I mean, this is a very good question because, the law on prohibition of discrimination based on sexual orientation in the area of employment was introduced in 2004. And for the first 10 years, actually, we had no single case of a court case of discrimination in employment. And me and my colleagues were just wondering, like, what's going on? I mean, we do know that, like, many LGBT people are experiencing discrimination in the workplace. So why don't they use this, quite a friendly legislation? And then, I mean, we realized that, this is a huge, I would say, challenge or huge, effort to, stand up and to say I was discriminated because of my sexual orientation, and to say these things to the public. So after 10 years, it took 10 years to, let's say, encore the awareness of the existence of the law in LGBT community, and now we have there is this, I would say, growing number of court cases. So it was at the very beginning. I mean, just like I said, it was a bit detrimental, this whole discussion, right? I mean, having Catholic nun in the parliament saying like, okay, and you can adopt the law, but take out the sexual orientation term and stuff like that. So that was generating a hostile discussion. However, it was worth doing it because after 10 years, it brought a significant, I would say, results. And now we have more and more LGBT cases being litigated in Polish courts. So that means that it takes time to get to know your rights, and that's it. There's a huge underreporting, phenomenon of underreported cases. However, I mean, my organization, we are focusing on sexual orientation discrimination in the workplace, and like last year, we had a great case that was won against the Catholic, and this is the word I'm not ever able to pronounce, diocese, yeah. The person, quite a known TV celebrity, he, every year in the course of the last 10 years, he was invited every summer by the radio station which belongs to the Catholic institution, diocese, and to, let's say, moderate, a festival of Catholic songs. And it happened 2 years ago that he clicked on the Facebook the event saying I support gay marriages, and for this click he got a phone call from the owner of the radio station saying you support faggots, so we are there's no option for you to be a moderator of this festival anymore. So we took a case to the court, and actually in the first instance we lost. However, in the second instance, we won quite a big, for Polish circumstances is big. However, it was not because of money, but just to have this verdict from the court saying that it was a violation of the prohibition of employment discrimination based on sexual orientation. So we have to be smart to in terms of using the legal provisions. However, we did manage to win a case against the huge institution with the great lawyers employed by the Catholic diocese. So it takes years. It takes time to not only for let's say the whole society to get used to minorities, but also it takes time for minorities to learn that you actually can enjoy your rights, and the rights are protected by the law. One last question.
You've mentioned that in your presentation, but could you comment a little bit more on this idea that the polarization of the Polish society is paradoxically contributing to furthering the LGBTQ agenda, mostly because of the strength of the anti-peace sentiment. I observed it this summer in Gdańsk, and when I talk to people, where, for example, the president of Gdańsk, who comes from the center-right civic platform party, and for whom it would have been unthinkable a few years ago, 2 years in a row participated in gay pride parades.
Yeah. Well, this is a great question, and you know what I mean. I think that like this phenomenon of polarization also requires most of Poles to not only to think but also to say, okay, which side I take, and part of if you say, okay, I'm a Democrat, and I values like democracy, human rights are there to me. So if I want or not, I have to, like take this LGBT part as well, and to say, well, okay, I'm not happy, but okay, I have to support the LGBT rights because they are like part of the democratic agenda, right? So just like you said, paradoxically, it forced people to take positions. And if you're taking position, this is part of this, broader democratic discourse, and LGBT is, is a part of this discourse, definitely.
Great, thank you. We still have a little bit of, he might have a little bit more time to take questions if you can come up to him after this, but we have to close the formal part of the session, so please join me in thanking Dr. Śmiszek.
Thank you.